good afternoon, or good evening, good morning, depending on the location where you are. And on behalf of Cuts International, let me welcome you to this webinar on BBIN motor vehicle segment. As we know that this COVID pandemic has made a significant dent to our economic activities, and it is now absolutely clear that it is our micro, small, and medium enterprises who are disproportionately affected as a result of this pandemic. We are yet to come out of it. Therefore, I'm not using the word post-pandemic world, at least for the time being. But we have already started discussing, not today, but for quite some time, that what would be the post-pandemic world is going to look like. What are the things that we need to look at? How can we make our recovery more resilient, more inclusive? And one thing which is very clear, yes, can somebody, Ronnie is joining, can somebody admit me? Sorry. That trade has to play a major role in this post-pandemic recovery. So I'm more on a positive note. I'm already started talking about post-pandemic recovery. And as we know that trade cannot take place, particularly when we talk about this part of the world, trade cannot take place much more positively, I would say. Of course, it is taking place unless we iron out our connectivity related issues. And broadly, I'm talking about two broad strands of connectivity. One is physical, the other is regulatory. So it is in this context, we are going to discuss how important this BBIN motor vehicles agreement is. We know that we have been discussing this for quite some time. We are aware of the challenges. There are a number of pieces which are being ironed out. We are much more aware as compared to what it was in the past, much more aware of the position of various stakeholder groups. I'm not going into their merits or demerits or whether they are right or wrong. That's a matter of discussion, but we are aware of it. We are also aware of various sensitivities, and that is why when we talk about BBIN motor vehicles agreement, effectively it is, at the moment at least, Bangladesh, India, and Nepal. So my question is, and this is a general question which I am going to pose, not just to our paper writers, Absar Alam, and others, but to everybody, that what is stopping us? What are those knots which we have to unknot, so as to say, so that we can have a much more seamless connectivity with our neighboring countries. In this context, I would also like Absar and others to also deal with, if possible, how important would it be, the TIR convention, for further smoothening, further ironing out these physical barriers, particularly, including regulatory barriers, some of them at least, of cross-border trade. Now, when we talk about connectivity and its importance, its role in post-pandemic recovery, we shouldn't just talk about road connectivity. We have to look at it in a much more holistic context. So we have this BBIN motor vehicles agreement, which, in my opinion, is a stepping stone for a much larger, much more holistic, I would say, multimodal connectivity framework, which we are already started thinking about it, talking about it, working on it. If I look at at least the two very recent documents which we are studying, one is the ADB's transport plan, Asian Development Banks. The other is a recent report by the World Bank, where they have shown how beneficial would it be if we can iron out these differences and barriers for a much more seamless connectivity. So in this context, therefore, one may question that when we are talking about BBIN motor vehicles agreement, we are doing a webinar on that. Why are we also talking about inland waterways? So this is exactly the reason why we are doing it. We're not just looking at road connectivity. We have to look at this road connectivity in the larger context of inland waterways, in a further larger context of economic corridor development. So this is the holistic vision that we have in mind, and this is what we are striving for. So on that note, let me now request my old friend, Absar Alam. He is a professor in an university in Bihar, MKS College, LN Mithila University, Lalit Naran Mithila University in Darbhanga, Bihar. He has worked with our Ministry of Road Transport and Highways for quite some time as a consultant of the Asian Development Bank. And he was exactly dealing with the subject of BBIN motor vehicles. So thank you, Absar, for writing this paper for us and for agreeing to be part of this webinar and to make this presentation. So over to you, Absar. You have about 12 to 15 minutes for making this presentation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you all for giving me this opportunity to write this paper. I'll just speak on this paper because my laptop is not working, so I'll not make presentation.
We can put it on the screen.
Yeah, you can put it on the screen, please.
So yeah. Yeah, perfectly all right. Afsar, carry on.
Yeah, so basically the paper, the objective of the paper is to analyze the importance of the BBI and MVA with the context of strengthening regional integration. And the other thing that the objective was basically to discuss the a larger ambit of the MVA, that how an intermodal logistics kind of thing can emerge with other modes of transport, including the road transport and like inland waterways. So in this paper, basically I discussed some of the development that are taking place, and also some of the issues that already highlighted by Bipul sir, that was related to the what are the causes that stopped us to implement the BBIN. We all know that this exercise was started in 2015, and still we are struggling to implement the same. So the purpose of this paper was to just analyze some of these factors and to recommend some policy measures so that we can basically implement this BBI and MVA. So the next slide is the next slide is related to issues that impacted the implementation of BBI and MVA, that we all know. Basically, it is it has some technical issues as well as some geopolitical issues. The technical issues is related to Bhutan and Nepal, and also geopolitical issue is also related to some of the things are related to Nepal and also Bangladesh. The main concern of Bhutan and Nepal is that the third country vehicles and the third country vehicles flying from flying on their territory. So this is uh, one of the issue raised by Bhutanese transporters, and also that is why the opposition party in Bhutan led to the uh, opposition of this BBI and MVA, and that's why the uh, MVA was not ratified by the Bhutanese parliament. Uh, Almost same is the case of Nepal, but over the course of time, Nepal has agreed to implement the MVA, and also they agreed upon the uh, provisions of protocols. So, main issue is implementing. The main issue is in ratification from Bhutan side. The Nepal and India and Bangladesh has already ratified the MVA. So other issue is like geopolitical issue of Nepal with India that we can skip. Highlighting those issues is not important. Uh, what I have done in this paper, that considering the sum of the development taking place in terms of logistics park that are coming along the inland waterways, and also logistics parks that are proposed along the dedicated freight corridors. These are very important nodes. So this so basically these nodes, these other modes of transport can also play an important role in integrating the sub-region, physical integration in the sub-region. The other thing is the BBIN MVA relates to only road as a mode of transport. So when we talk about intermodal logistics, intermodal or container transport, we have to consider that the last mile connectivity is to be carried out by road. And so to make fruit of intermodal transport or container transport, we have to incorporate some intermodal characteristics to BBIN MVA and its protocol also. So what are the basically
I think we can't hear him.
Yeah, there's some connectivity issues. Absar?
Am I audible?
Yes, go ahead, please. Maybe you can drop your video. Then it will be better.
Am I audible? I have muted my video. Yeah.
Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the recommendations are basically Bhutan and Nepal has raised their apprehensions regarding third country vehicles. So the protocol has already provisions related to quota that can be adopted in initial level, because Bhutan can also adopt quota, means allow some to make some restrictions on third country vehicle. So this provision, this may be used to circumvent the apprehensions of transporters in Bhutan and Nepal also. The other thing is contracting parties can specify routes for applying vehicles under this agreement, and these routes they can also specify some terminating centers, so that their apprehensions regarding environment as well as their interest of transporters can be uh, met easily. One important aspect is related to the cross-border services, transport services, and logistics services that also include insurance. This is, I suppose that the contracting parties has already agreed upon some mechanism, but of course, in these areas, TIR convention can play an important role because they have already established mechanism to address these issues. So the contracting parties can look for accessing the TIR convention in order to solve the issues that relates to insurance and accident related aspects. The other recommendation is development of new logistics park that along the inland waterways can also be become the part of large become the may come under the ambit of BBIN and MVA in order to provide last mile connectivity. And the interesting part of these developments is that these logistics parks are very near to countries like Bangladesh and Bhutan. For the information that there are some development taking place in India that the government of India is proposing to develop logistics parks in Jogigopa and in Assam and in Bihar, as well as in Durgapur in West Bengal. So these locations are very important. And the important thing of developing a logistics park or logistics centers is that this will lead to containerization and increase in intermodal traffic. And we all know that containerization is one of the revolution that happened in the last century that changed the political economy of the freight movement across the world. And this made the movement of goods and services, goods easily. And that also, in order to move container traffic and freight traffic through container, we also see that computerization has also had made some fruitful impact and lasting impact on overall logistics, logistics development. So for BBIN region, this is one of the important aspects that computerization and containerization both must be taken into account so that we can optimize the implementation of BBIN protocol and motor vehicle agreement. My next aspect was the discussion was on the existing facilities. That is, existing facilities are like integrated checkposts already established along India-Nepal borders and India-Bangladesh borders. These facilities are very large facilities. They have cold storage and other warehousing facilities. So we have to think of optimally utilize these facilities so that these can be used to facilitate the implementation of motor vehicle agreement if signed and adopted as soon as possible. And I would like to conclude that not only the transport corridors that specified that are going to be specified in protocol, these transport corridors should not be taken into account standalone. This has to be developed as an economic corridor, and economic corridors are very important in order to achieve the developmental goals and also the basic objective of such vehicle agreements. These economic transport corridors, which should be envisioned to be an economic corridors with both exit and entry of logistics services, logistics transport, related other aspects, infrastructure, so that the BBIN MVA can become a vehicle for improving the intermodal connectivity between the countries of the sub-region. This is what my presentation is. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Absar. I mean, there are a couple of questions which are coming to my mind, which I'll get back to you later, including I'm sure that there must be questions from others. Now, one particular point which I'd like to mention, or rather two. One is that it would be good to know more about this transporters' concerns, particularly in Bhutan and Nepal, or in any country. It could be country agnostic or country neutral. Is it I think it's a combination of there is some genuineness, at the same time there are transporters cut, which you need to look into. My second point is that I often say this, that more often than not, we see best is an enemy of the good. This may not be a best agreement, but certainly this is a good agreement as compared to what we are seeing today. So my point is that why don't we start implementing it and then learn from there and move upward on our learning curve. So this is a proposition on my part. So we'll come back to this later. Let us first hear from Mr. Hussain and Mr. Roy on their work on inland waterways, which is primarily they have looked at Bangladesh and India, though they have touched upon Bhutan and Nepal as well. So over to you, Mr. Hussain and Mr. Roy, whoever wants to go in making this presentation, and you have about 12 to 15 minutes for making your presentation. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Bipul. I think you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay. What myself and Mr. Monowar discussed is that I will primarily speak on the first part, covering the Indian side of the paper, while Mr. Hussain will cover the Bangladesh side, because then we'll be able to give you detailed information also.
You have a presentation as well,
yes,
right?
I have a presentation. If it could be put.
Can somebody put it on the screen? Yeah.
Thank you so much. Before I start, I must thank Cards International for allowing me this time to speak, joining with Mr. Hussain. I will also thank to all the other delegates and the participants for today's webinar. Now, what we tried in our paper is to find out if the inland waterways can be linked to the industrial and logistic hubs of India and Bangladesh, and also to Bhutan and Nepal. So with our aim, we tried to explore the opportunities that is lying on the declared protocol route. We all know that India and Bangladesh has signed a protocol on IWT&T, Inland Water Transport and Trade, for providing seamless movement of inland barges, almost all across Bangladesh, to certain portions in India on both the sides. That means in Eastern India as well as in Northeast India. Now the protocol route number 1, which is from Calcutta to Silghat in Assam, connects many inland ports, many seaports as well. And we have tried to analyze route number 1, because we found that it plays a very vital role in case we want to set up a multimodal transport route through this inland water inland rivers. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah. Now the protocol route number 1, which covers from Haldia to Silghat, it en route touches 4 seaports. One is at Calcutta, second is at Haldia, third Mongla, and fourth is fourth is Narayanganj. Narayanganj is a river port, but we also wanted Chittagong port to be connected through this in this paper, because we found that if Chittagong port is connected, then the landlocked countries like Bhutan and Nepal can have seaport connectivity very easily. You'll find in the next slide. Can we go to the next slide, please? We have seen that the protocol route number 1, if it can be divided into 2 parts. One is the first stage where the entire route is within the tidal zone of the river. Another is the section which remains in the non-tidal area. The first stage, which remains in the tidal zone, has got very good depth conditions. It has got, as I told you, about 3 seaports on the protocol route, and if it's connected with Chatterjee, we'll have 4 seaports. We have got the very good developed port at Pangaon, at Naranganj, at Dhaka. Ashuganj is also coming up, it's almost complete, which can handle multimodal provide multimodal transport facility. By multimodal transport facility, we tried to find out if containerized good can be moved through these ports. Can we go to the next slide, please? The next slide, please. Yes. See, as I told you, out of all the ports that is lying on protocol route number 1, the Calcutta, Haldia, Mongla, Chattogram, they all have a draft availability of more than 3.5 meters. They can handle vessels of 2,000 ton because of the sheer size of the navigable channel. All these 4 jetties are having the RCC jetties with crane facility. They handle containers as on date. They have rail connectivity excepting 2 places. One is at Mongla, another is at Pangaon. But they all have very good road connectivity. The distance of the road, national highway, the railway network is not very far away from these ports. So through the paper, we found that the first part of the route, if it is activated for multimodal handling, it can be done almost with no time. We have got very good road, we have got very good port, we have got very good port related facilities like container handling facilities. In this section, first section, we can handle vessels up to 2,000 tons. It can be container, it can be bulk, it can be break bulk. Whereas in the upper section of the protocol route, which is we have considered as the second phase, that will possibly handle for the time being maximum up to 1,000 ton. Many of them do not have crane facilities. They have berths or they have floating pontoon, and they will take some lead time for multimodal transport. But as I said earlier, that the first section can handle multimodal port almost in no time. Can we go to the next slide, please? In this, Mr. Monowar will elaborate more, but I'll just touch on the point that once this protocol route is developed, all the 4 nations of the sub-region like India, Bangladesh, Bhutan, and Nepal can have a very good connectivity to all the seaports. The next slide, please. This is a small exploration that we tried to make about the industrial hubs that are lying around Calcutta. Calcutta being a very old British settlement, the industrial development that started taking place in Europe also had its cascading effect in India, which started from almost from Bengal. And all these industrial hubs, which are lying almost at a stone throw from Calcutta port, are very good, having very good industrial setups. Like in Calcutta, we have got about 75 major industries. The distance of these industries from Calcutta port are more or less within 45 kilometers, excepting the one at Durgapur, which is 150 kilometers. They are all lying next to the main railway line with broad gauge connectivity, and the distance of the main line is not more than 10 kilometers. Similarly, the distance of the national highway to all these industrial hubs are not more than 10 to 15 kilometers. Can we go to the next slide, please? Similar to Calcutta, Haldia has also become another industrial hub of West Bengal. Haldia has come up with mostly with very big industries They have thermal plant, they have petrochemicals, they have chemical plants, and there are about 34 major industries around Haldia port. All the industries here in Haldia are also within a very short distance of Haldia, mostly about 10 kilometers. The railway line is also around 5 to 10 kilometers from these industries, excepting the one at Kharagpur and Jamshedpur, which are at 80 and 290 kilometers from the port, but they are having very good road and rail connectivity. I think the next slide will be about Bangladesh. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, the next slide is on Bangladesh. So I'll request Mr. Monowar Hussain, who had jointly done this paper with me, to talk on the balance slides on Bangladesh, please.
Okay, can you go back to the slide with 4 flags, flags of 4 nations? Right.
Now,
Yes.
yes.
Okay. Okay. We are we want to tell something about Bagavari. You know, Bagavari is on the right bank of the Brahmaputra River. It's not just on the Brahmaputra River, but is 11 kilometers away from the mouth of the Brahmaputra River, and that river, name of the river is Hurasagar. So the Bagavari port was established on the bank of the Hurasagar River, and Hurasagar meets with Brahmaputra 11 kilometers away from the port site. Now the port is well-structured port, and you know, this is the important port in the northern region of Bangladesh, and the port is the gateway for POL, petroleum and lubricant, distributed in the whole northern region of the country. And the other bulk is, you know, other bulk are fertilizer, coal, and construction material. Now, you know, Bagavari is for providing service to the landlocked region of Nepal and Bhutan, and also landlocked region of India. The Bagavari is 143 kilometers away from the hilly land port, connected by national highway, and 234 kilometers away from Banglabandha, and 130 kilometers away from Burimari. Is 168 kilometers from hilly, Burimari 302 kilometers, and 365 kilometers to Banglabandha. So, you know, and this is you know, national highway, and the road connection is road is further developed, will be further developed by Asian Development Bank funded project. Now another, you know, if we go up to the border following the Brahmaputra, we'll find a port, a river port near to the border, that is Chilmari in Bangladesh. And Chilmari, you know, a river port without any port infrastructure, and that port is very much closer to Burimari. The distance of Burimari from Chilmari is 150 kilometers, and Hilly is 143 kilometers. So it's you know, currently the Bhutan traffic and you know, Bhutan traffic and Nepal traffic is following this route. So I think you know, in addition to Jogigopa, Bhutan will have another lifeline for using the waterway up to Chilmari, and from Chilmari it can go up to any destination or to the Bay of Bengal also. Next. Yeah, right.
This one, yeah.
This is the site of the, you know, industrial hubs in and around Dhaka, Narayanganj, and based on the IWT connectivity. base. You know, every industrial hub rather located in Dhaka and Bhairab. Bhairab is in the upper Meghna, Dhaka jute, Dhaka and Narayanganj cotton, Dhaka, Narayanganj, and Tongi also, and Dhaka cement for Dhaka and Narayanganj. All the cement factories except one are located on the bank of the river, and their raw materials are coming 100% by waterway from India. Fly ash is coming from India, and from Far East and other countries, the clinker is coming by waterway from the maritime ports of Chittagong and Mongla. Ceramic is also, not far from the waterway, and RMG, not based, very much nearer to the river ports, and knitwear, plastic also, they based on the on other models, including the river. So that is also, for Chittagong is the capital of the commercial activity in Bangladesh. And all these, industrial hubs are also located in the Chittagong region also. So next. Okay. Can Arun, would you kindly explain this?
I can. Yeah, I can. See what happened, why we divided the protocol route into two parts, phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 is the part where we can start from day 1. The waterway is very good, there are good ports. Whereas the moment we go to the non-tidal section, the phase 2 section, the river becomes unidirectional and very wide. The river on an average beyond the tidal range is about 10 to 15 kilometers wide. And at places it goes even up to 50 kilometers wide. There are multiple channels, multiple island formation, and the river keeps on shifting between the weighted perimeter during the entire season. Of course, in flood season, it flows all over, but during lean season, that is from the month of November to the month of June, it keeps on oscillating. So identifying the navigable channel becomes a task. To maintain the navigable channel becomes another task. And unfortunately, because of this island formation, because of the very sharp bends, not very big sizes can ply at this moment. At the moment, the vessels that are comfortable to ply are about 600 ton to 1000 ton, not more than that, with a draft limited to at places even 1.5 meters. So the upper stretch is really a challenging work. I mean, we cannot say that we can start immediately, but in the first phase of the protocol route, part 1, which is under tidal influence, it is easy, I mean, almost a cakewalk. Can we go to the next slide, please? As we discussed in our paper, we have seen that the fairway for the first phase is very good because we need 3 components for a good multimodal movement. One is fairway, second is terminal, third is vessel. The terminals are also ready in the first part where we have 4 seagoing terminals. There are developed river terminals, whereas in the upper stretch, we have certain locations like Jogigopa, Dhubri, which have got very good connectivity with Bhutan, but they are yet to be developed properly. Jogigopa do not have anything. Dhubri, we have 1 port, but it is still not capable of handling containerized goods. And the other part, unfortunately, in my slide, I have shown it is as green, but that should have been actually in red. The vessel part. Unfortunately, there is no vessel which can carry containers. Container movement vessels are not there, excepting only one, which has been introduced by Inland Waterways Authority of India, just for demonstration, which can carry hardly 18 containers, which will certainly not be an economical movement. So we should have container vessels of 2000 or 1500 ton capacity. Only then we can have a proper economic movement. Can we go to the next slide, please? So here comes areas for improvement, investment, and participation. Whereas the terminals for providing container handling facilities, rail and road link, or good navigable channel with 24/7 movement, we have the government has to step in. They have to provide necessary facilities. They have to also ensure that electronic documentation is done so that waiting time at different customs point is minimized. But for private, there is ample scope where they can have tailor-made flat bottom barges for carrying containers. As I said, it is almost a virgin field. So if the private people want to invest and operate, this is the right time for them. Can we go to the next slide, please? I think with this, I have come to the end of, we both have come to the end of our presentation. And this is what we wanted to say, that if we take it in a phase-wise manner, it is possible.
Thank you, Mr. Roy and Mr. Hussain. There are two or three, rather very briefly, I would like to mention a couple of points. One is that in your presentation, Mr. Roy, you told us, you showed us, there is no rail connectivity in Mongla Port or in Jogigopa, these two places in particular. Now, the latest development is that in Jogigopa, in the multimodal logistic park in Jogigopa, there is going to be rail connectivity. Secondly, also a new railway link is being developed between Mongla Port and Khulna town. So that work is still going on. So going forward in the next couple of years, if not earlier, we are definitely going to have rail connectivity in Mongla Port. Now that, in fact, reinforces the point which you have made, both of you, forcefully made, I would say. That, look, of course, we need to take a holistic look at all these things, but at the same time, there are specific issues, and and they may be small, but in one sense, but may not be small in another sense. If we can address those specific issues in specific areas, in specific places, then it would not be much of a difficulty to not just to envisage, but to implement multimodal connectivity in this region. And it's not just that Bangladesh and India, these two countries are going to be benefited. And as you explained, if we just focus on this Bagbari port and Chilmari port, then Nepal and Bhutan, particularly Bhutan in this case, then Nepal also to some extent, will also, Eastern Nepal in particular, will be benefited as a result of. So these are the specific things which we are trying to get out of our work and trying to put these stories or knowledge into the system. And I would strongly urge agencies, bilateral and multilateral agencies like JICA or Asian Development Bank or World Bank to look into this specific infrastructure development work which is needed to make. I mean, I think the investment into on these specific initiatives, the cost of the investment, the cost part, but of course that will be there, but the return will be much higher going forward. So on that note, let me now come to Mr. Ataur Rahman. He is the Secretary General of International Chamber of Commerce, Bangladesh chapter, and a very reputed industrialist in Bangladesh. So Mr. Rahman, I have a very simple question for you. That we know that you know it very well, we know it very well, that what are the benefits that this motor vehicles agreement, these multimodal connectivity initiatives are going to bring to our countries. So what I would like to know is that what specific demand that you are making to your government for their early operationalization. You will be benefited, you as industrialist will be benefited, you as consumer will be benefited, and we as consumers will also be benefited. So it's win-win for everybody. So that's something. And when do you think that we are going to see the operationalization of these motor vehicles agreement? So this is a very specific question for you, sir. Over to you, sir, in about 10 minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Chatterjee. First of all, let me correct you. I am not an industrialist. I am the CEO of the Bangladesh chapter of International Chamber of Commerce, and we have members of all the major chambers are our members, and we have multinational, national companies, banks are our members. But I was I'll be speaking more of on my experience of the situation, of the feelings of the companies, of our stakeholders, and the presentations that has been made by two groups of our speakers. Now I see that I think the infrastructure is almost there. But the thing is that whether we have the stakeholders, I mean the exporters, importers, and the freight forwarders, the trucking system, the transport mode people, whether they are aware of these facilities, because BBIN has been signed in 2015. Now it is almost 6 years. We have been talking. We have been only on the policy level. It has been really very positive thinking, but in the ground level, how much has been really in place to promote the BBIN? As Mr. Chatterjee you said, and also our previous speaker said, the TIR convention is very important. So unless Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan signs the TIR convention, the movement of containers will be very difficult. Recently, I have seen that Pran, one of the big exporters of food products to India, has shipped from Narayanganj port to Kolkata a ship containing all food items. So river port is operational between India and Bangladesh. Road links are also been in place now. But for Bhutan and Nepal, I think probably the two ports of Bangladesh, especially Mongla and Paira port, which is a new port coming up. So that two ports can serve the Bhutan and Nepal, but then you have to have the multimodal transport. Once it reaches the border in India, from Bangladesh to India, cross India, then go to Bhutan and Nepal. That is where the facilities, whether they have the facilities. And what the first speaker said that the Bhutan and Nepal are objecting to their third country transport. If similar will be the condition in Bangladesh also, because if an Indian big truck comes, I don't think the Bangladesh roads are in a position to handle the big trucks movement from Kolkata to all the way to Tripura through the Bangladesh road. So that is why the river port is being used by Kolkata, by India. So here the container has to come. So maybe the trucks bringing in from Kolkata to Benapole can move the containers to the local transport in Bangladesh, and then it moves from Bangladesh border to India, to the Seven Sisters countries. That is one thing. And second thing, for example, the Bangladeshi trucks, I don't think will be able to go to Bhutan and Nepal because they are not trained for driving through the mountains. So we have to, I think it will be better, Mr. Chatterjee, that all this information that we have, the studies that you have done, maybe you should have a kind of another interaction with the real exporters. I know that RMG exporters from Bangladesh are having lots of problems sending the goods to India because of the customs formalities and all these things. The hustle at the Benapole port and then going down to other side. All these things can be avoided if we have the TIR carnet, so that consignments can be already loaded in Dhaka and moved to destinations in India or Bhutan or Nepal, wherever it goes. So these are certain things, and I was just reading in today's newspaper, this Mizoram minister was in Dhaka, I think. He came yesterday, and they had a meeting with the commerce minister of Bangladesh. And Mizoram wants to use Chittagong port. So if Seven Sisters of India wants to use Chittagong port, then maybe we have to look into the capacity of Chittagong port also, whether we can really handle, and then from Chittagong port to the inland transport. So that is again the movement of transport and container comes in, and where the TIR convention is very, very important. And BBIN I think the BBIN political decisions are very strongly there, but in the implementation, in the bureaucratic system, how much the bureaucracy is willing to solve all the problems of this implementation of the BBIN is very crucial, and how much as you said, cost effectiveness. So if for having the cost effectiveness studies, we need to sit with the stakeholders, meaning the exporters of exporters, importers of all the countries, sit down with them, and also the tracking companies, and see how this can be resolved and what are the steps that should be taken to implement the BBIN. So with my limited knowledge, this is what only I can tell you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rahman, for flagging some of the practical implementation issues. We'll come back to this point about implementation. That's very, very important, because once we start the implementation of the agreement itself, then we realize that, oh no, these are the practical issues on the ground. Then we may not be able to take it much forward. So we'll come back to this point, particularly when we're going to hear from Mr. Reddy. So on that note, let me now request Dr. Fahmida Khatun. She is the Executive Director of Center for Policy Dialogue. Center for Policy Dialogue is not just one of the leading think tanks of Bangladesh or in our region, but globally it is reputed as a very globally reputed think tank. And we know that CPD is doing a lot of work on this subject. So my question to Dr. Khatun would be that we know that there are implementation issues, but what about political will? I think many of these implementation issues can be overcome if the right political will is there. At various levels, not just at policymakers level, but also at the level of various stakeholders. So it would be great to hear your thoughts on that, including if you can tell us a little bit about the thinking of the Bangladeshi establishment, whatever the policy community on this matter. Thank you, and over to Dr. Khatun.
Thank you, Dr. Bipul Chatterjee. Thank you, Katz, for inviting me. This is a very important issue, and the presentations which you have made are really, to the point and very specialized. So, as you have asked me a very tough question, actually, because I think whatever we say and whatever policies we design or strategies we formulate, all those will be, futile unless there is lack of political will. That has been the case, unfortunately, in case of South Asia. Though there have been many efforts, discussions and dreams, but most of them had remained actually unfulfilled. And as you have rightly pointed out that the political will, probably, there was a certain level of political will, definitely, but I think that was not enough. And we have, starting from SARC to many other initiatives, so those remain unfulfilled. So what is, what is more prominently discussed in the region, that that despite so much potential, this region had remained one of the least integrated regions, as you know, and several regional cooperation initiatives have been taken, have been initiated, but we could not really benefit from each other's comparative advantages. So I feel that there is a serious lack of political commitment, in the sense that the region had, though it is homogeneous in many cases, but there are also less homogeneity within that, and mistrust, tension. All these had actually engulfed our region, and which had been in the upper hand rather than political, rather than economic gains. So I feel that what has been today what we are discussing regarding this BBIN motor vehicle agreement. And the previous speakers rightly mentioned a number of issues. So I would, I think many of those issues are related to the, the lack of trust amongst ourselves, and also lack of some serious commitments. For example, I mean, this agreement is definitely is going to be benefiting, and there have been studies how much we will benefit. However, there are some background work which are still needed, I mean, in order to take it forward. And discussions and the previous discussions mentioned about the physical infrastructure which needs to be improved, then the road density, and the financial I think requirement, the need for mobilization of finance, because it's going to be a very expensive infrastructure development, infrastructure venture, in fact. And as has been estimated that about 8 billion will be required to develop the infrastructure, and in case of Bangladesh also about 3.7 billion I think will be required. But how that resources will be mobilized, that is a question also. But apart from that, the issue of whenever we talk about regional trade, cross-border trade, issues like the standardization, harmonization of documents and agreements, coordination at the border, all these issues, and also the issue of the customs requirement, all these, and also data, electronic data interchanges. These issues are an integral part of this. So there are some sort of inhibition to exchange many of the things, and the issue of security is also very important in this, how that will be maintained. This is one important. But I wouldn't go to to the nitty-gritty because the presenters have discussed, but I would say that if we really want to have a successful agreement like this, anything on connectivity, it has to be triangulation of connectivity. For example, three areas have to be combined together. So it has to be, there should be investment connectivity, trade connectivity, and transport connectivity. If we cannot triangulate all these together, no venture will be economically viable and economically beneficial. So at the end of the day, we have to look, make sure that these initiatives are financially beneficial for each of these countries, and it has to be a comprehensive and integrated venture rather than bits and pieces. That's the thing, because if you look at take the example of Ashuganj International River Port. In the last 5 years, how many consignments have been have gone? So if it is not financially beneficial, it is not going to be very lucrative. So that's why the importance of infrastructure development is very, very important. So I would now conclude again with highlighting that yes, we have to work together, fine-tuning these agreements, but most importantly, it would be that political wills and commitments and we have to also, in order to convince the political leaders, we really have to show that how it's going to benefit, and also we should not also be complacent about the other challenges, security challenges, and other external challenges which might be there in the way. But I think an open-mindedness is very important, and constant discussion is also very important. So it is unfortunate that we have not seen very much improvement, but I would also appreciate that at least there are initiatives like BBIN, along with BBIN, other initiatives like BIMSTEC, BCIM, all these can also be taken forward. All these can go hand in hand. One can be supplemented with the other ones, So these, all these together, can bring us more benefit. And so in the end, of course, political commitment is very, very important. That can happen at the other level. But as economists, our job is to highlight the economic benefits and how we can overcome the challenges, the technicalities. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Khatun. Thank you for underlining a number of important points. I'm not going to go into the details at the moment. I would just like to highlight a couple of them. One is that you have rightly argued that we have to look at connectivity under its different perspectives or different pillars. So say investment is one of them. How much is, we have done a fairly good job in terms of identifying infrastructure needs, investment requirements, but we are yet to do a fairly good job on from where that investment is going to come and what would be the, not just benefit, but what would be the cost of that investment. Now, talking about political will, if you look at all this together, it has to come from the top. So this is not the job of one ministry. And here comes the importance of whole of government approach. Unfortunately, I would say, some positive thinking has started taking place in that regard in our countries, but there is a fairly long way to go. But things have started moving into the right direction. Now, keeping all these things in mind and after hearing all this, I think Mr. Reddy is in a position, in the best position, to tell us about the way forward. Mr. Reddy, Satish Reddy, is a consultant in the Regional Cooperation and Trade Facilitation Unit of the Division on Regional Cooperation and Operations Coordination of the Asian Development Bank in the India Resident Mission. And before that, he occupied a very senior position in our Revenue Ministry. And he is one of those experts on trade facilitation, not just in technical sense, but also in human sense. So over to you, Mr. Reddy, in about 10-15 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Bipul. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for those kind words.
We can't see you.
Always been. No, there's some issue there. So let me just use the audio. Yes. So as I said, thank you very much for those words. You've always been liberal. Coming to BBIN, just a few thoughts, particularly on the updates part. Actually, you know that Asian Development Bank had supported the negotiation as well as doing the necessary analytical studies to help the negotiators, etc., in the evolving phase of the agreement. And as all of you are aware, the agreement was signed, in fact, in June 2015. That's over 6 years ago. The agreement was signed at a framework level. Essentially, the agreement enabled exchange of traffic rights, which in other words means that motor vehicles of one country can ply in the other country, subject to certain conditions. Now, these procedures and conditions were to be set out in protocols, one for passenger vehicles, one for cargo vehicles. Those protocols were also drafted by ADB, acting as an informal secretariat. In fact, I don't know whether Mr. Ronald Butiang is in the room. So he had played a seminal role. He is in this and leading the initiative from the ADB side. And so we had drafted everything that was required. The passenger protocols negotiation was also complete. The cargo protocol was partially done, a few issues remaining. So substantive work was done, but I'm not sure what is happening because at least since the onset of the pandemic, that means roughly a year and a half, though we have heard BBIN being talked about in seminars, being mentioned in joint statements between the countries, in terms of actual progress in completing those documents, signing and getting on with the job of implementation, perhaps nothing has happened. which is very surprising, since this is one agreement for which there's been a lot of clamor from the trade. There is a lot of appetite from the trade. In fact, I can also share that we did some trials, with real world cargo, etc., trying out what would the procedures that were under discussion in BBIN. And for example, Marks and Spencer, who had sent a shipment of garments from Dhaka to Delhi under BBIN process, they reported that they had over 30-40% of savings in time and cost. So there is trade appetite. The agreements and protocols are substantially done with a few issues outstanding, and that's where we seem to have stalled. So I can completely agree, Bipul, as you have repeatedly flagged the need for political will and whole of government approach. The enthusiasm and will shown to initiate the agreement, is needed to complete it and implement it also. I would also like to mention that hearing some comments about infrastructure deficiencies, whether roads can support vehicles, the agreement has a number of safeguards built in, because I think it was recognized that BBIN's region is peculiar because there is one very large economy and one, smaller economies, purely because of the population size, etc. So a number of safeguards were built into it. For example, each country can specify the routes on which it will allow the vehicles into their country. They can define the origin points and termination points. They can define the axle loads, that they will allow only vehicles weighing up to certain weight or vehicles of certain size. So they are also a provision for issuing a limited number of permits to start with, and after gaining more confidence to expand the numbers. So the agreement has a number of safeguards built into it, so that if a smaller economy has apprehensions that one particular country may swamp them, these safeguards can be a very good way to start. And then based on your experience and when you gain confidence, you can expand. So in all these issues that were mentioned can be actually tackled through the safeguards. Even the issues of driver, for example, not being experienced in driving another terrain, there are elsewhere in the world, the vehicle can continue, the drivers can change at the border. In fact, there are, we also have been involved in an India-Myanmar Thailand agreement where you have right-hand drive and left-hand drive. So all these issues are not insurmountable. The agreement has, as I said, safeguards and safety valves. So all it needs is the decisive intent to complete the small portion that is outstanding and get on, particularly, as I said, since trade has also shown a lot of appetite, and I'm sure they will benefit a lot. This is the first part. And the second part is that now that it is taking time, and as of now we don't know when it will actually kick in, there are other alternatives that can be explored. For example, Indian Customs, I know, has experimented with what they call off-border clearances. That is, not to do all processes at the border, but do at the hinterland. If cargo is emanating, say, in Uttar Pradesh or West Bengal or even Gujarat, there are dry ports where you finish all the formalities and put a secure lock, which is electronically monitorable, and you just let it go at the border after checking the lock. So all the congestion at the border is removed in one go, because you don't have to wait there to do all these documentations and checks. And the exporter or the importer has the convenience of completing the customs formalities at a location proximate to his business headquarters, rather than having to appoint an agent in a far-off location and relying on him. So there are solutions like off-border. I'm glad that TIR is being mentioned. Yes, that is also a solution. India has already signed on and operationalized the TIR, and it is looking at trade with Central Asia for this purpose. But if Bangladesh, I think particularly, is interested in taking forward the TIR, I think it will be a good alternative. Of course, TIR doesn't provide for exchange of traffic rights, so that has to be still done through a motor vehicle agreement, which is like BBIN. But the procedures and all, one doesn't have to negotiate or reinvent the wheel, because TIR does offer a instrument of to take care of these procedures and documentation. So whether it is using off-border or TIR, I think other alternatives should be explode, since we have now spent 5-6 years waiting for something to come, which should have come much faster. I'm also very happy to have heard these multimodal movements, waterways, etc., and that is very important. Not just for itself, it's to provide options to the traders. Also, the terrain of the countries is such that there are rivers, maybe there are not bridges to support container movement. So, a multilateral movement is very good to provide logistics efficiency. A couple of examples which were in news recently. Somebody mentioned Pran transporting some lychee concentrate, lychee products, etc., through inland waterways, because most of the traffic has been one way. India sending fly ash, nothing much coming back the other way. I think Pran is now experimenting with that. Similarly, a few garment manufacturers from Bangladesh are shipping their goods through Benapole, Petropole to Calcutta and evacuating from Kolkata airport. In fact, there's been even one trial consignment which went right up to Mumbai port, Navasheva port. And from there, if the shipping liner connectivity is good or the airline connectivity is better, then you cross borders on road and then use the nearest or most convenient gateway to go to Europe or wherever is the destination of the products. So these are, in fact, so Indian Customs has again operationalized this. So cargo, while not in huge volumes, does come in by road and then takes the Calcutta port, a Calcutta airport, and in few cases some other airports to go abroad. So multimodal movement is necessary, and BBN will support these multimodal movements also. As long as one leg of the movement is by road and it is cross-border, then there is importance of BBIN. So BBN is an essential ingredient of such multimodal movements also. And I don't know how many of you know the agreement on use of Chattogram and Mongla ports signed between India and Bangladesh, which also I'm told will be operationalized this year. There have been some trials done, and I think Bangladesh has determined the tariffs and fees which they would like to charge. So hopefully it will see that some traction this year. This agreement says that the goods coming from, say, Calcutta port to Chittagong will be carried on Bangladesh trucks to Agartala or Northeast till the operationalization of BBIN. And once BBIN is operationalized, BBIN would be used for this purpose. This is a stated provision in the agreement. So there is a provision for use of BBIN there also. So as I said, there are a number of uses of cross-border road movement. Much ground has been already covered. Few issues are left, and I'm sure there are solutions which have been implemented elsewhere in the world. There are global best practices. So resolving these issues is not a problem. And I would like to again repeat that there are a number of safeguards so that no country needs to really fear that this agreement is going to damage their transport sector or economy. And other alternatives like off-border clearances and use of TIR should be explored, whether or not BBIN comes into operationalization at the soonest. And yes, political will, intent is necessary, and I think that's where the work that CUTS is doing in terms of advocacy, bringing people of all countries on a virtual platform, will be very helpful, because each of us may like to go back and do the necessary advocacy with our governments and articulate this demand to operationalize this. Thank you, Bipul. I'll stop here for the moment.
Thank you, Mr. Reddy. Let me pick up your last point, advocacy. I think here we are talking about, after hearing all this, I think the content is very much there, but intent is yet to reach that stage. So when we put everything under these two, content and intent, we get a clearer picture. So here, I mean, setting aside Bhutan for the time being, we are talking about an agreement involving 3 sovereign nations. And it has to be led by our foreign ministries. So this is what we have understood. And now we are going to direct our advocacy to the foreign ministry. That the content is already there. Particularly, you have pointed out, you have highlighted the fact that a number of safeguards are there. At the same time, it may also be true that while those safeguards are there, but stakeholders for whom those safeguards are they may not be that aware. So this is something, that's another gap that we need to plug or plumb. This require a bit of plumbing, so as to say. So it is on this point about safeguards which are already there, but stakeholder, for example, transporters, they may not be aware of those safeguards. It is in this context I can see that there are two very important gentlemen from Nepal who are participating in this webinar. They are Mr. Dahal and Mr. Sam Dahal and Mr. Purushottam Oja. Mr. Oja is former Commerce Secretary. Mr. Dahal is, I think he's associated with Asian Development Bank. He's one of those very knowledgeable persons in Nepal on trade facilitation and logistic issues. So it would be great to hear from them that even if these safeguards are there, why is it that the corresponding stakeholders may not be that much aware, so that there is less buy-in on their part about this agreement. So whoever wants to go first, I have another question for Ambassador Chakraborty. I can see he's participating. Can somebody unmute Mr. Oja and Mr. Dahal? Mr. Shyam Dahal?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Let me. Okay. So thank you very much for giving me this platform. This is very important because, well, under Roni Butong, I have been working for ADB as a consultant for like 5 or 6 years. And then I was very much worried about implementing this BBIN MBA from Nepal side also. I'm just advocating different agencies also. And I always like to see this happening, this BBIN MBA. So I think August 2019 also, we conducted one very stakeholder consultation here in Kathmandu also. And then we discussed a lot on this. But having so many discussion and all other things, actually things are not moving in a good pace. But I'm very happy to know that, well, recently, Ministry of Physical Infrastructure has circulated protocol to the related agencies in Nepal. And then I asked them whether they have got any comment on that. Or then they said me that the Ministry of Transport told me that they have received, I think, the comments from all the government agencies. So it's very good that the things are moving now, and then probably we'll see this BBIN MBA implemented. But basically, when I was in consultation with the stakeholders and other agencies, I have 2 or 3 things that I think that would contribute to implement this BBIN MBA. The first thing that I see that I think there is some sort of lack of synchronization of the efforts. What I'm saying is that ADB is working a lot, and there is also Ministry of Foreign Affairs working on BBIN MBA, and course is also through their local partners doing a lot of things on BBIN MBA. But there I have seen very little coordination among themselves also at the national level or at the regional level as well. So I think there should be some sort of synchronization of the efforts towards implementation of this BBIN MBA. That is what I have felt for last 3 or 4 years. That is one area. The second area that maybe we have to think about is that there is one article probably our Purushottam Oja sir will also highlight. There is a little bit apprehension on Article 7.3, which ask about the fees and charges, and there is one notion that this fees and charges may limit the right of the landlocked country. Although I have gone through so many documents, that is not that case of thing. But I think there are certain elements in the BBIN MBA framework agreement because it is taken from the SARC agreement. So almost identical, but there are certain issues that the academicians are raising that this might limit the landlocked country, well, I think what you call rights, but I have not seen that sort of thing there. But even if we have been talking, I have been talking with the Satish also, then if there is something problem, then we can even address those things through the protocol also. So there is some sort of advocacy in that area also. That is one thing. And then the third thing is that ADB has done a lot of stakeholder consultation also, and then courts has also done. But again, there are some apprehension from the stakeholder also. So there are a lot of safeguard measures in the BBIN MBA framework agreement as well as in the protocol also. But we have not been reached out to the actual stakeholders who has certain apprehension regarding the movement of the vehicle or the apprehension of the welcoming the neighboring vehicle inside Nepal. So all those things, I think there are certain apprehension, but I'm very much confident that there are a lot of safeguard measures also in the framework agreement that actually safeguard the interest of the nation. So the main thing is that we still have to reach those people who have some confusion on it. So these are the three areas I think we have to take further, and then I'm confident that we can see this implemented in near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dahal, Shyamji. I would let me respond to very important points. This is what I'm going to propose to my colleagues, led by Prashant Sharma, who is leading this project. Let us list down those concerns or apprehensions in a matrix form. And then on one side, we have concerns of the apprehensions. On the other side, we have the safeguards. And prepare a simple, small document, 3-4 pages maybe, and transliterate that into Bengali, Nepalese, Hindi, at least these 3 languages. And we can go, I mean, if I request you, Shyamji, to do it in Nepali, or Mr. Oja, I know that you will be more than happy to do it. And then take it forward to the concerned stakeholders, not just about writing 1 or 2 articles in English language newspapers. We have to speak in a language and reach out to those in a manner that things can go forward. Now, on that note, Mr. Oja may want to add something, but I'll come to you, Mr. Oja, later. We know that my point is, and this is, I would request Ambassador Chakravarti, who is our High Commissioner to Bangladesh, and then our Secretary in the Foreign Ministry, that now the time has come for the Foreign Ministry to take the final step, final move. So not a question, sir, but my point is that what would be that one thing that we should do to convince our Foreign Ministry that you go ahead with this in this manner? Just 1 or 2 things that we should do as part of our advocacy, sir. So if you can educate us, that would be great. Ambassador Chakravarti, can somebody unmute him? Ambassador Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti, he is one of our mentors.
So we think he is not around.
No, he is there. I can see him.
But we have unmuted him, sir. He's not accepting the request.
Sorry. In that case, then Mr. Oja, if you would like to add anything. Otherwise, if I may, and again, this is an impromptu thing, if I may, Mr. Oja, yes. Mr. Oja, we can't hear you. Mr. Oja, we can't hear you. Sorry, I think there is some technical issues. But as I was saying, this is an impromptu, again an impromptu matter. After hearing all this, not in the context of BBI and motorway facility, but in the overall context of multimodal connectivity in this sub-region, if I may ask Ronnie, Mr. Putyong, who is leading ADB's efforts on this matter, his thoughts on how multimodal connectivity should be taken forward. For example, there is a proposal. We have multimodal logistic park in Asuganj in Bangladesh. It is coming up in Jogigopa in Assam. We have one in Sahibganj in Bihar in India, Bihar or Jharkhand. And another one is proposed in Farakka in West Bengal. So how do you see this developments in the overall context of transport connectivity in this sub-region? I mean, again, it's up to you. Swiftness?
Yeah, we have unmuted him, sir, but he's
Okay.
not accepting.
He may not be. There are some, today there is a lot of internet issues are there. Anyway, so so this is the overall context. This is the overall context which we are talking about. So the one concrete thing out of this work, out of this webinar in particular, is that we got to know the number of concerns, apprehensions are there, but at the same time, there are safeguards to address them. But it is also evident that these concerned stakeholders may not be aware of it. So this is something going forward, this is something which we are going to do. Secondly, about Mr. Dahal's point about this coordination, this is again one area where we are continuously striving to make progress. So that will continue doing that. So there could be coordination at least at two levels, within country and between country. So on that note, let me now request.
Hello, Mr. Bipul.
Yes.
Dr. Bipul, Chatterjee, this is Ronnie Butyong.
Hi,
So,
Ronnie.
Yes, how are you?
Good. Good to hear
Good,
your
good.
voice.
Yeah, likewise. I've been enthusiastically listening to the conversation. And I'm happy that BBI and MBA is still getting the attention that it rightly deserves. And I thank the speakers for rightly pointing out so many things that are important in moving it forward. As Mr. Reddy said, which was reiterated by Shyamji, advocacy is important. And beyond advocacy, Dr. Chatterjee, I think what's important is to try and implement it already, even on a pilot basis, for the participants that are ready. In that sense, I was just thinking that currently we are looking at BBIN as a three-country agreement, considering that Bhutan has yet to ratify. But if you look at it, India and Nepal actually already have a transit trade agreement, which has some kind of exchange of traffic rights provisions as well. So the real void, the real need is between Bangladesh and India, isn't it?
Yes.
And in that sense, I was just thinking, why don't we pilot it between, why don't the two countries pilot it between themselves? Especially considering, number one, very good relationship between the two countries. Number two, there are also other agreements that have been forged and are about to be implemented. And number three, the economic benefits are clearly in these two countries. So just a thought, maybe someone from the group may be able to enlighten us on the possibility of a pilot, of a trial of BBIN between the two countries, Bangladesh and India.
Yeah.
And then point number
Right.
2 on multimodal connectivity. I think there are various plans already. Dr. Bipul, you know that, no? You have the SASEC operational plan. You have the multimodal logistics corridor, which was done by ADB for Jogi Gopa. You also have the BIMSTEC transport master plan for connectivity, etc. There's no shortage of it. But the important thing right now, I think, is getting the political will to make sure that the software will move. You can build all these roads, but without the vehicles and goods crossing borders easily, I don't think it will lead to any clear development outcome. Let me stop there, Dr. Chatterjee, and over to you.
Thank you, Ronnie. I mean, you are absolutely right in the sense that why can't there be a pilot between India and Bangladesh? The point is that it's already done. Even the pilot is done. But even then, it's not moving. So this is something we need to ponder over a little bit more and see to it that it is done on the ground. So let's not think too big, too ambitious at the moment, but let's start on a pilot basis again, maybe between two specific points, origin and destination, one specific commodity or product, and then quickly do what are the benefits, what are the challenges, create awareness. And that is how I think we need to take one step at a time or move one stone at a time, so that over time we can create a more conducive, more positive environment. I'm not at all saying that the environment is not positive. Of course it is positive, but much more than what it is today. And in this context also, I think when we talk about TIR convention, I think as compared to other neighbors, if we can convince Bangladesh to be a part of it, then I think it's going to make a lot of sense, a lot of positive movement in the positive direction. Or off-border clearance. We know that there can be goods can be cleared in Durgapur ICD, Inland Container Depot, for goods from India, going from India to Bangladesh. Similarly, straight away, they can go to Kamalapur ICD in Bangladesh and get cleared there. And here in this context, let me put it in this manner, particularly for Shyamji and Ronnie, that you know that Jamuna Bridge is already there in Bangladesh and is being updated.
Padma is coming. Padma is coming.
And Padma is coming. So how these two bridges are going to play a role or set of roles for better connectivity between Bhutan and Bangladesh and to the rest of the world, Nepal and Bangladesh to the rest of the world. So this is something which, I mean, in a futuristic manner, in a futuristic thinking, we have to keep in our mind that Jamuna Bridge is there being upgraded, Padma Bridge already is coming up, is going to be ready within a year or two. And it's intermodal, bimodal, I would say, both road and railways. So these are some positive developments which I think, and all this, at the end of the day, this kind of connectivity initiative, they are going to make our post-pandemic recovery much more resilient for the simple reason that other than smoothing our connectivity, more seamless connectivity, is also going to create a lot of employment opportunities, job opportunities. And that's very, very important for resilient economic recovery. So on that note, Mr. Oja, would you like to say something? We can't hear you.
Dr. Chatterjee, can I say something?
Yes, please. Please, sir.
Yeah, because I was listening to Mr. Reddy of ADB, and he has said, that there are a lot of, some transactions are going on, movement of, like H&M has taken the garments from Dhaka to Delhi. So, and then Pran has shipped some consignments of lychees to Kolkata. So there are some examples, but as I said earlier, that maybe you can take some initiative to actually find out what are the difficulties that the operators are facing, like the exporters from Bangladesh to India and importers from India to Bangladesh, and same is the case with Bhutan. If you can take some Nepal and Bhutan, if take some actual position from the stakeholders, and then maybe place it to the policymakers. From the top level, we see the politician, the Prime Minister of Modi, India is coming. The Nepal Prime President is in Dhaka today. Maldives President came. Then all these things happening, and everybody is talking that yes, we have to do something with you. So politicians from the top level is there, but from the bottom level political system or the bureaucratic system or the mechanism is probably not conducive for promotion of trade, because this is a huge market that we have. We are talking of 1.6 billion population of this country.
True.
And if Dr. Fahmida was talking about the opportunity, economic opportunities, we have to see the ASEAN concept, what has happened to ASEAN, and why not it is happening to us, to the SAARC countries. So what are the bottlenecks that is creating the problem for us to flourish and for us to do more investment and trade? That may be something you may like to, because you have done a lot of studies, so it is probably time that we do something on the practical side and make some practical recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rahman. Of course, we can learn a number of lessons from ASEAN, but one thing which we need to keep in mind, that in case of ASEAN, there are a number of reasons for its success. I'll not go into the details. There's a beautiful book by Kishore Mehbubani. I want to read that. But one reason is that they always started in a less ambitious manner and then built on their success. My point is that what you were saying just now, we already have this pilot. I know that there's a report in case of H&M, but that pilot was done in a manner that it was so ceremonial. There's hardly any glitches. So you have to have a very practical thing. This Pran thing has just happened, so we don't know the details. I am not aware of any pilot between Nepal and Bangladesh or Bhutan and Bangladesh via India. But those things can be worked out. But my simple point is that since we have the agreement in place, we have the protocols in place, we know, but the concerned stakeholders may not know that. Of course, there are concerns, but safeguards are always there. Why don't we just start? And then we can learn a number of lessons. Of course, there will be some glitches, but that is still very much missing. So that is something which I think we need to work on. And I've already talked about one specific work that we need to do is to list down the concerns and corresponding safeguards. And not just in English language, but in other relevant languages, and take it forward to those stakeholders. So this is, I mean, going forward under this project, which is supported by the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office of the United Kingdom, we are going to have a number of advocacy meetings or workshops. So this is something which we are going to do. So on that note, and let me also request Mr. Reddy that given a choice, what is it that you would prefer between the choice between off-border clearance and TIR convention? The reason why I'm asking this question is that I know that India is doing it. So is there any discussion with Nepal or Bangladesh or Bhutan about a mirror activity of this kind of border clearance in those countries so that it can actually be done on the ground rather than just having this discussion about this concept? Mr. Reddy, if possible.
Yeah. Yes, Bipul, thank you for raising a very important question. As you know, the trade in our region, particularly the bilateral trade, not the third country transit trade, but the bilateral trade is, there's hardly any containerization. Okay, so the trade happens mostly in open trucks, maybe few cases closed trucks. Now, off-border, why India has chosen to limit itself to its part is because if there is container, then it's easy to transload the container at the border, let's say to another truck. When the trade is not containerized, that necessarily involves offloading of goods, unless there is a BBIN. So, while in fact, goods have gone from Gujarat to Petrapol under off-border, but since they go in open or normal trucks, they have to get unloaded there because our Indian truck can go only up to Benapol; it can't go beyond, and vice versa for the other countries also. So, off-border, India has chosen to make a start as a measure of facilitation for trade, but to convert this into, say, ICD to ICD movement, let's say, as you said, can I take it from an ICD in Kanpur to an ICD in Kamlapur, which is near Dhaka? For that, either the trade should be containerized, in which case you have to just lift the container off here and place it into the other truck, or there should be BBN so that the same truck can go from Kanpur to Kamlapur. So it has to be one of these. Partly, and this is not a serious issue, partly it also, I think, because Nepal and Bangladesh, to my knowledge, do not have many hinterland clearance locations, customs clearance locations. Yeah. For example, in Nepal, I think the ICD is there, but that's in Birganj, which is actually at the border. It handles rail cargo. But I understand there's an ICD being developed near Kathmandu. I'm not sure when it will be operationalized, but as and when it is operationalized, that will give an excellent opportunity. Similarly, Bangladesh also, when I was part of some discussions, but Bangladesh said that Kamlapur ICD is already choked handling Chattogram cargo. They said there may not be room for taking land customs cargo there. So that's another condition, that you need hinterland customs clearance locations. They need not be very elaborate container depots. They can be smaller facilities also. But that is also the third wheel in this whole thing.
So thank you, Mr. Reddy. Thank you. I mean, this is something which we need to make note of and see to it how we can take this advocacy forward. The key here is containerization of cargo, right? So here, unfortunately, there is not much containerization of cargo between these countries. And that is what India has started addressing, if I understand correctly. In fact, till the other day, we do not have the facility to produce containers. So that is something which we are taking up under a new scheme called performance linked incentive, so that we can produce our own containers. And we have raw materials. We have iron, we have other raw materials, we have light engineering facilities, everything is there. But somehow I don't know why we didn't produce much container, whereas we are importing containers from outside, particularly from China. So these are the things which you need to look at much more closely. So there is another question for Mr. Reddy, that is it possible to give BBIN an institutional shape, like BIMSTEC with a secretariat, something like that? Is it possible to do that, Mr. Reddy?
Yes, people. Now, there are two ways I can look at it. What is it that is holding it back? That's one way of looking at it. Is it a lack of institutional support? I mean, we all know that within a period of 1 year, around the time 2015 and 16, the 7 or 8 rounds of negotiations were organized. As I said, the MBA was signed, the protocols were almost finalized. Certain other, like electronic cargo tracking trials and all were done. So, though ADB was an informal secretariat, a lot was achieved as long as the countries were willing to, show that buy-in, that ownership. So, a formal secretariat, I'm not answering you in the negative, but I don't think that's the hindrance as to why BBIN is not taking shape finally. But
Yeah.
yes, an operational running secretariat would be good. But again, I would like to flag one, that how much of domain expertise is housed in the secretariats? Okay, maybe I should calibrate my words carefully. We know the SARC secretariat, we know BIMSTEC secretariat. Do they house experts on any of the areas? Or they could again, like I understand, both the secretariats have some institution arrangements with ADB, for example, and some kind of MOUs that they can tap into the expertise or TA resources of ADB where required. Maybe that's another way of doing that.
Absolutely, I agree.
Just to sum up, yeah, it's not the hindrance. This is not the hindrance, but yes, if there is a secretariat and if they are willing to tap expertise wherever required, it's a good thing. Thank
Absolutely, I agree with you completely. There is, if a secretariat is there, it has to be judged by the work, not just by just having a secretariat with few officials, and sometimes countries are not nominating or not deputing officials, things don't move there. Whereas a body like Asian Development Bank can effectively do much better work as compared to, I'm not taking any name, as compared to many secretariat, quote unquote. So the essential point is that if there is a will, there must be a way forward. If I want to learn something, then I will try to find out, even if that requires reading under street light. On that note, let me now finally request, we are coming to an end, just about 10 minutes to go. May I now request Arunda or Mr. Hussain, and then Dr. Khatun and Absar for their final words, very briefly in 1 or 2 minutes. What is your take from this discussion? So over to you, Arunda, first. Mr. Roy, can somebody unmute?
He has already got a privilege of unmuting himself.
No, you can also unmute.
I did that, sir.
Or whoever wants to go first, Absar or Dr. Khatun or Mr. Hussain.
Yeah. I want to ask some clarification from you. You speak about the political will, and Dr. Fahmida explained. And from the political will comes. You know, in Bangladesh, I tell you that frankly, I tell you the actual situation in Bangladesh. When you are transporting goods from Kolkata through Bangladesh, it comes to Ashuganj, and then it is transferred to Agartala. Now, what the Bangladeshi citizens are watching, that the Indian goods from one Indian place going to another Indian place through the territory of Bangladesh. Now, who is benefiting? Only India is benefiting. You know, no government leader, no political leader, no any CSOs in Bangladesh explained that Bangladesh is also benefiting. Bangladesh is providing the transport services, and India is transferring goods. Sometimes the price of the goods is less than the service charge. So this is what is happening in Bangladesh. Then and political leaders, when the press or political leaders, some vested interest group are critical about this, political, so even I didn't find any CEO, so including the CPD, to explain this in a transparent way. That is the problem.
I think it's a very important point, the political economy point. That, and if I was in your position, I would have raised the same point. That Indian goods coming from one part of India, going to another part of India via Bangladesh, what's in it for me? And when I can easily stop that by making some noise. So this is it. We know that what is there in it for Bangladesh, but the common people may not be aware. So this is something where our role comes in. Yeah, and by our role I mean think tanks, not just cuts. So this is something which I would request Dr. Khatun, her response on this point. This is very interesting point that Mr. Hussain has raised. Dr. Khatun, if I may. I think there are still some issues. Mr. Roy, you want to add anything? Or Absar?
Yeah, I would like to add one thing, that is not lagging behind because of technical issues, but rather it is a political issue. And of course, the responsibility of organizations like CPD and CUTS is important, but the political economy is that in long run or short term benefit all the stakeholders. And it is to the task of the researchers and the organizations like us to convey the benefits to all the stakeholders, to hold meetings with in all the already part of the countries. So this is what I wanted to add. And the other thing is that the technical issues can be addressed, as Reddy has already pointed out, that can be addressed in one or the other ways in protocol. So protocol has all the required.
Thank you, Absar. There are some audio issues, but I get your point, the thing which you wanted to say. Mr. Roy, you want to add anything? Otherwise, we've come to
No. I think Monowar has already covered.
Okay, so we have got a number of very important, interesting points. So I think overall, this webinar, we could achieve at least some of the outcomes which we are envisaging. So we're going to prepare a report, and not just a report, but see to it that how these action points can be taken forward. So on that note, let me now request my colleague Prashant Sharma for a very brief vote of thanks. Over to you, Prashant.
Yeah, thank you, sir, and thank you, everyone. This is a very useful webinar in the context of the project which we are implementing in the Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal sub-region. And thank you, the panelists, Mr. Absar Alam and Arun Roy and Monowar. So, and thank you for preparing papers for us and then participating in this webinar. And Dr. Rahman and Dr. Khatun, and thank you for your valuable inputs. And in particular context, like what Dr. Rahman has suggested, that we need to talk to exporter importers to know the real-time challenges they are facing. So your point has been well noted, and we will take it forward. And if needed, we will also consult with you. And Mr. Reddy, your point with regard to safeguards and safety walls, and vis-a-vis concerns. So that is also very useful. And as suggested by Bipul, we will prepare a metrics and translate that in different languages and disseminate it. And I would also like to thank Mr. Budion and other panelists, and last but not the least, to my colleagues in helping in implementing this webinar so successfully. Thank you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.